What if one of the biggest lies empaths have ever believed is this: that they were born to heal everyone? Many empaths spend years carrying emotional burdens that were never theirs. They become the listener, the fixer, the rescuer, the person everyone turns to during a crisis. And while this may look like kindness, psychologically, it often creates a dangerous pattern. Because somewhere along the way, many empaths begin believing that their value comes from how much they can help others. They begin measuring their worth by how needed they are, how much pain they can absorb, how many problems they can solve, and how many people they can keep emotionally stable. At first, this feels meaningful. It feels like purpose. It feels like love. But over time, it becomes exhausting. Because no matter how much they give, there is always someone else who needs help. Another problem to fix. Another emotional burden to carry. Another relationship to save. Slowly, the empath starts neglecting their own needs, their own healing, their own emotional well-being. They become so focused on understanding everyone else that they forget to understand themselves. And that's where emotional burnout often begins. Not because they are weak, not because they care too much, but because they have accepted responsibilities that were never theirs to carry. What if that belief is exactly what keeps them exhausted? What if empaths were never meant to heal everyone? What if they were meant to understand others without becoming responsible for them? What if empathy was never about rescuing people from their struggles, but about offering compassion while allowing others to walk their own path? Today we're exploring the psychological truth behind empathy, emotional boundaries, emotional responsibility, and why some of the most compassionate people eventually discover a life-changing lesson. You can care deeply about others without carrying their pain. You can support people without saving them. And you can be an empath without sacrificing yourself in the process. Empaths are often described as emotional healers. People naturally open up around them. Strangers share personal stories. Friends seek advice. Family members rely on them during difficult times. Because empaths possess a deep ability to understand emotional experiences. They notice what others miss, the sadness hidden behind a smile, the frustration buried beneath silence, the emotional wounds that people try hard to conceal. Their sensitivity allows them to connect with others on a deeper level, often creating a sense of comfort and safety that encourages people to open up. But understanding pain and fixing pain are two very different things. This distinction is where many empaths struggle. Because when someone feels deeply understood, the empath may begin feeling responsible for making that person's pain disappear. They listen longer, give more advice, offer more support, and invest more emotional energy, believing that if they care enough, they can somehow help another person heal. The moment empathy becomes responsibility, emotional exhaustion begins. Psychologists often observe that highly empathetic individuals tend to absorb emotional energy from their surroundings. They don't just witness emotions, they feel them. Sometimes so intensely that the line between another person's pain and their own begins to blur. Over time, they may start feeling accountable for other people's happiness, healing, and growth. If someone remains unhappy, they blame themselves. If someone continues making harmful choices, they feel they haven't done enough. If a relationship struggles, they often carry more than their fair share of the emotional burden. Yet no human being has that power. No one can heal another person simply through love, support, or understanding. Healing is an internal process. It requires personal awareness, personal responsibility, and personal willingness to change. It cannot be forced from the outside. No matter how much love, support, patience, or understanding someone provides. The healthiest empaths eventually learn a powerful truth. You can guide people. You can support people. You can care deeply about people. But their healing journey will always belong to them. Many empaths develop their sensitivity early in life. They became experts at reading emotional environments. They learned to notice tension, conflict, disappointment, unspoken emotions. Long before others recognized what was happening, The empath could often feel that something was wrong. They became highly aware of shifts in mood, changes in tone, and emotional undercurrents that most people overlooked. This ability often helped them navigate relationships. It helped them avoid conflict, understand people more deeply, and respond to emotional situations with remarkable awareness. But it also created a hidden belief. If I can sense someone's pain, I should do something about it. At first, this belief may seem compassionate, even admirable. After all, most people want to help those who are suffering. But for many empaths, that desire gradually becomes something much heavier. It becomes responsibility. Over time, that belief becomes a personal mission. The empath starts solving problems nobody asked them to solve, carrying emotions nobody asked them to carry, and sacrificing their own well-being in the process. They begin feeling responsible for keeping everyone comfortable, everyone happy, everyone emotionally stable. When someone is hurting, they rush to fix it. When someone is struggling, they feel obligated to help. And when someone refuses to change, they often blame themselves for not doing enough. Psychologically, this creates a pattern where empathy slowly transforms into emotional overfunctioning. The empath starts doing work that belongs to other people, work that only those individuals can do for themselves. The problem is not empathy. The problem is emotional responsibility becoming misplaced. Because every person is responsible for their own healing journey. No one can grow on behalf of another person. No one can learn someone else's lessons. And no amount of love can force transformation in someone who is not ready for it. The healthiest empaths eventually understand this truth. They can offer support without taking ownership. They can show compassion without carrying the burden. And they can care deeply about others while still protecting their own emotional well-being. Because empathy becomes most powerful not when it rescues people, but when it respects their ability to heal themselves. Human beings naturally seek connection. We all want to feel valued, accepted, appreciated, and emotionally connected to the people around us. But some people learn to earn connection through service. Instead of believing they are worthy simply because they exist, they begin believing they must constantly provide something in order to deserve love and acceptance. They become valuable by helping, needed by fixing, accepted by rescuing. Over time, this pattern becomes more than a behavior. It becomes part of their identity. For empaths, this pattern can become deeply ingrained. Because their natural sensitivity allows them to recognize the needs of others almost instantly. They see pain, notice struggles, and often feel compelled to respond. At first, this feels like compassion, but psychologically, something deeper can begin happening beneath the surface. The brain begins associating self-worth with usefulness. The more they give, the more valuable they feel. The more people depend on them, the more important they feel. And the more problems they solve, the more they believe they deserve love and appreciation. This creates a powerful emotional reward system. Helping others temporarily reinforces their sense of worth. But this creates a psychological trap, because there will always be someone who needs more, someone who is struggling, someone who wants support, someone facing challenges that cannot be solved overnight. And if an empath's identity depends on helping everyone, they eventually become emotionally depleted. No matter how much they give, it never feels like enough, because the need for validation continues growing. Psychologists often describe this as a cycle of external validation. A person's self-worth becomes dependent on how others respond to them rather than how they view themselves. As a result, the empath may struggle to rest, struggle to say no, struggle to prioritize their own needs. Because deep down, they fear becoming less valuable if they stop giving. Yet true self-worth cannot be earned through endless sacrifice. It cannot be sustained by constantly meeting other people's needs. And it cannot depend on how useful you are to everyone around you. No amount of giving can fill an identity built on external validation. Because lasting self-worth comes from recognizing your value even when you are not fixing problems. even when you are not rescuing anyone, even when you choose yourself. The healthiest empaths eventually learn that their worth is not measured by how much they give away. It is measured by their ability to care for others without abandoning themselves. And that realization changes everything. This is where many empaths reach a breaking point. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but gradually. After years of putting everyone else first, something inside them begins to change. They realize they've spent years understanding everyone except themselves, listening to everyone except themselves, caring for everyone except themselves. They know the struggles of their friends, the wounds of their partners, the fears of their family members. Yet they often struggle to identify their own emotional needs. Because for so long, their attention has been directed outward. The emotional energy they continuously gave away left little room for their own growth, little room for self-discovery, little room for healing, and little room for asking an important question: what do I need? As the years pass, the imbalance becomes harder to ignore, and slowly, resentment begins appearing. Not because they stopped caring, not because they became selfish, but because they started noticing the imbalance. They began recognizing that many relationships were built on giving rather than mutual support. They noticed how often they were expected to listen, comfort, and understand while receiving very little in return. And this realization can be painful, because it forces them to confront a truth they may have avoided for years: that constantly putting others first does not automatically create healthy relationships. Psychologically, chronic self-sacrifice often leads to emotional fatigue. The mind and body were never designed to operate in a permanent state of emotional giving. Eventually, internal resources become depleted. The body and mind begin signaling that something is wrong. The empath feels drained, disconnected, overwhelmed. They may lose motivation, feel emotionally numb, or find themselves withdrawing from situations they once eagerly engaged in. Simple conversations feel exhausting. Small responsibilities feel heavier. Even helping others no longer provides the same emotional satisfaction it once did. Not because they cared too much, but because they cared without limits, without boundaries, without balance, and without recognizing that their own emotional well-being deserved the same care they so freely gave to everyone else. This breaking point often feels painful in the moment, but psychologically, it can also become the beginning of transformation, because it is often the moment an empath finally realizes that caring for others and caring for themselves should never be mutually exclusive, and that true compassion includes extending the same understanding, patience, and kindness inward that they have always offered to everyone around them. Eventually, something changes. The empath reaches a point where continuing the same pattern becomes impossible. Not because they stop caring, not because they become cold, but because they become aware. Aware of how much energy they have spent trying to rescue people from situations those individuals never intended to change. The empath stops trying to save people who refuse to save themselves. They begin recognizing a difficult truth. No amount of support can help someone who is unwilling to help themselves. No amount of advice can transform someone who refuses to listen. And no amount of love can heal someone who remains committed to unhealthy patterns. They stop repeating advice that nobody follows. They stop having the same conversations over and over again. They stop investing enormous emotional energy into problems that never seem to move toward a solution. Not because they no longer care about the person, but because they finally understand that growth cannot be forced. It must be chosen. They stop carrying emotional burdens that do not belong to them. They stop feeling responsible for fixing every crisis, solving every problem, or preventing every disappointment. For the first time, they begin separating compassion from responsibility. And for the first time, they understand an important truth. Compassion does not require self-destruction. You can care deeply about someone without becoming responsible for their choices. You can love someone without fixing them. You can support someone without carrying their entire emotional world. You can stand beside someone without carrying them. You can offer guidance without taking ownership of their journey. And you can remain kind without sacrificing your own well-being. This realization often feels uncomfortable at first, especially for empaths who have spent years believing that helping others is their purpose. Setting boundaries may feel selfish. Stepping back may feel wrong. Prioritizing themselves may feel unfamiliar. But over time, they begin to see the difference between healthy support and emotional overextension. They learn that protecting their energy is not an act of selfishness. It is an act of emotional maturity. And as this understanding grows, something remarkable happens. The empath becomes stronger, calmer, more balanced. They stop losing themselves in other people's struggles and start building a life that includes their own needs, goals, and emotional health. What once felt like guilt gradually becomes freedom. What once felt like responsibility becomes perspective. And what once felt impossible becomes one of the healthiest shifts an empath can make. Because true compassion was never about saving everyone. It was about caring deeply while remembering that your own well-being matters too. Empaths were never born to heal everyone. This is one of the most important truths many empaths eventually discover. For years, they may believe their purpose is to rescue people, fix relationships, carry emotional burdens, and help everyone find peace. But true empathy was never meant to function that way. Empaths were born to understand, to connect, to bring awareness, to offer compassion, to create emotional safety. Their gift is the ability to make people feel seen, heard, and understood. In a world where many people struggle to express their emotions, empaths often provide a space where others feel accepted without judgment. That ability is powerful, but it is very different from healing someone, because healing belongs to the individual. No empath can force transformation. No empath can rescue someone from lessons they must learn themselves. Every person has experiences they must face, choices they must make, and growth they must willingly pursue. No amount of compassion can replace personal responsibility. No amount of support can do another person's inner work. Real empathy respects personal responsibility. It recognizes that every person must choose their own growth. Psychologically, meaningful change only occurs when an individual becomes willing to examine themselves, accept accountability, and take action. That process cannot be outsourced, it cannot be gifted, and it cannot be forced. The empath can encourage, listen, support, and guide. But the decision to heal always belongs to the other person. This understanding changes everything, because it removes the impossible burden of trying to save everyone. The empath no longer feels responsible for every outcome, every mistake, or every struggle. Instead, they learn to offer compassion without taking ownership, to care without controlling, and to support without sacrificing themselves. The empath's role is not to carry others, it is to walk beside them when appropriate, to offer a hand without carrying the entire weight, to provide understanding without abandoning their own needs, and to remind others of their strength without becoming responsible for their journey. When empaths finally understand this truth, they become healthier, stronger, and more balanced. Because they realize their purpose was never to heal everyone. Their purpose was to bring compassion into the world while remembering that every person must ultimately heal themselves. One of the hardest lessons for empaths is learning boundaries, not because boundaries are complicated, but because many empaths spend years believing that unlimited access is the same thing as love. They believe that being available at all times is kindness, that saying yes is compassion, and that putting themselves last is what good people do. Because boundaries can initially feel like rejection, especially for someone who has built their identity around helping others. The moment they begin saying no, they may feel guilty. The moment they step back, they may worry about disappointing people. And the moment they prioritize their own well-being, they may question whether they are becoming selfish. But psychologically, boundaries are not walls. They are filters. They help determine what belongs to you and what belongs to someone else. They create clarity. They protect emotional energy. And they allow relationships to function in a healthier and more balanced way. Without boundaries, empaths often absorb emotions that were never theirs to carry. They take responsibility for problems they did not create, and they become overwhelmed by burdens that belong to other people. Healthy boundaries allow empathy without emotional absorption, care without burnout, connection without self-loss, support without self-sacrifice. An empath can listen to someone's struggles without making those struggles their own. They can offer compassion without feeling responsible for fixing everything. And they can remain emotionally present without becoming emotionally overwhelmed. This is where true emotional maturity begins. Because empathy becomes stronger when it is balanced by self-awareness. And once an empath understands this, their relationships begin changing dramatically. They become more selective about where they invest their energy, more aware of unhealthy dynamics, and more willing to protect their emotional well-being. They stop attracting people who only take, people who view kindness as weakness, people who constantly demand support while offering very little in return. Instead, they start building relationships based on mutual respect, mutual effort, mutual understanding, and mutual responsibility. The quality of their relationships improves because they are no longer driven by guilt or obligation. They are guided by balance. And perhaps most importantly, they finally learn that boundaries do not reduce compassion, they strengthen it. Because when an empath protects their own emotional health, they can continue caring for others without losing themselves in the process. Every emotionally healthy relationship contains one important principle. Each person owns their own emotions. Not in a cold or detached way, but in a grounded psychological reality. Support is healthy. Control is impossible. You can stand beside someone during their difficult moments. You can listen without judgment. You can offer presence, stability, and understanding. But you cannot manage their inner world for them. You can encourage growth, but you cannot create it for someone else. Growth requires personal awareness, willingness, and responsibility. No external force can replace that internal process. You can offer wisdom, but you cannot force understanding. Because understanding only becomes real when a person is ready to see it, accept it, and apply it to their own life. You can provide love, but you cannot make someone heal. Love may create safety, but it does not automatically create change. Healing is an internal journey that belongs to the individual. The moment empaths accept this truth, their emotional burden becomes lighter. Not because they care less, but because they stop confusing compassion with responsibility. They stop believing that every outcome depends on them. They stop carrying the emotional weight of choices they did not make. And they begin to see relationships more clearly, where support is mutual, not one-sided, where care is balanced, not draining, and where empathy exists without emotional self-sacrifice. Because once this shift happens, something powerful changes. They are still deeply empathetic, still understanding, still compassionate, but they are no longer emotionally overextended. They no longer lose themselves in other people's struggles. And they no longer measure their worth by how many people they can fix. Instead, they understand a simple but life-changing truth. You can care deeply about others without being responsible for their healing. And in that understanding, they finally find peace. If you're an empath, remember this. Your purpose is not to rescue everyone. Not every struggle around you is a responsibility you must take on. Not every emotional storm is something you are meant to fix. And not every person in pain is someone you are meant to save. Your purpose is not to absorb everyone's pain. You may feel it deeply. You may understand it clearly. But understanding does not mean ownership. Your sensitivity allows you to perceive emotions that others miss, but it does not obligate you to carry them. Your purpose is not to sacrifice yourself so others can avoid growth, because growth, healing, and change are personal responsibilities. They cannot be outsourced to someone else's compassion. They cannot be replaced by your effort, and they cannot be completed through your exhaustion. Your gift is awareness, compassion, understanding, connection. These are powerful qualities that can bring comfort, clarity, and emotional safety to others. But they are most powerful when they are grounded in balance. When empathy is paired with self-respect, when care is paired with boundaries, and when connection does not come at the cost of self-abandonment. Because the healthiest empath is not the one who heals everyone. The healthiest empath is the one who understands that caring for others should never require abandoning themselves. True strength is not measured by how much you can carry. It is measured by how clearly you know what is yours to carry and what is not. And sometimes, the most compassionate thing you can do is allow others to take responsibility for their own healing journey. Not because you do not care, but because you finally understand that real love does not require self-destruction.